Wait. Okay, we are live now.
Hi, this is a presentation by Mark and Mary Halpert from 3D Learner, and we're going to talk tonight about strength-based parenting for your right brain learner.
We're going to do a little bit different thing tonight. We're starting a 7-piece series, and it's actually based on our international best-selling book called The 3D Learner. The book is actually available on our website for a download, or you can support us by getting either the audiobook or the Kindle book or the hardcover book on Amazon.
We will post the links to both the download and the Amazon book on our below this Facebook Live at the end of the broadcast.
In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments during our presentation, please don't hesitate to comment. I will be watching the comment section while Mark and I are doing this presentation, but we are open to having comments throughout what you think, your personal experiences. We're here to be able to coach you, the parent, because we've been there. I'm going to say still there. As parents and grandparents, it just sort of is a never-ending battle, but we totally support you and support all parents around the world, and we're glad you're with us tonight. And if you're seeing this on the rebroadcast, we're glad you've joined us. We hope you get some positive information out of this that can help you help your child be successful.
And next week, for everybody's information, on Tuesday night, June 14th at 9 p.m., we're going to be discussing why outrageous success is the only option for your child. We've been there with our own children. Our second child, our first child was actually a plug-and-play kid, very successful. Second child, the wheels came off. And it wasn't until we had a meeting before high school where they said she wasn't college material. Mira, God bless her, became a mom on a mission, discovered our daughter was a right brain learner, a child who learns differently, and developed what's become known as a 3D Learner program. We've helped 2,500 kids. We've talked to over 10,000 parents. And our goal is to help you be an informed, empowered, and proactive parent or grandparent who makes a huge difference for your child or grandchild.
Just to be clear, it wasn't, and I know all of you are going through this, it wasn't like we didn't try anything and everything for the time that our daughter was in preschool and kindergarten, that we recognized is that there were certain things that were difficult, including certain health issues. So it's not like, oh, all of a sudden we realized something was wrong when she was going into high school. This is an ever-growing battle, and the number of conversations that we have every week with parents talks about the fact that they are trying so many different things and it just doesn't work, and their child is just so smart. But now, and especially after these couple of years of the pandemic, they are truly burned out, and parents are burned out. So we're here to be able to try and help you make that transition so that we can avoid any more and support these kids are creative pieces.
And what's been delightful and challenging in the last couple of weeks is a number of our students have graduated from high school, some from college, some going into middle or high school, many of them doing extremely well. And then we've got some calls from some really distraught parents and grandparents who are incredibly frustrated, whether they're in private school, public schools, homeschooling. These last 2 years, as Mira alluded to before, have been incredibly stressful, but they've also resulted in kids falling further behind. So we're going to talk about who these kids are and how they can be far more successful.
See how our computers work. Renee, I see your question. I promise you I will answer when we get through some of these questions. Thank you for asking. Mark, the question is, how can we give an example of what a day in our program looks like?
And you can answer that now, Mira.
Well, so our whole belief, when we talk about our belief, is that these kids that are smart are right brain creative learners, and they've not really been taught to their strengths. And we all know, we're going to go through this a little bit, about when we actually get to their strengths, they go from this, oh, aha moment. It's like that light bulb moment when the things go off. So our day is presented that way. And quite honestly, I've known from the very beginning, listen, I'm the one that probably gets bored and certainly has attention issues. And if I've seen something that I think looks like something I've done before that I didn't like very much, I don't want to do it. Well, our kids are just the same way. So we relate to the kids to be able to try and have them have an experience that's really quite different. We are now, if we are in person, we are in an office that is actually attached to our home. And yes, that's different because as one parent came last week and said, oh my goodness, this is so perfect. It makes my child feel at home. It's a different setting. It's not a clinical sort of office type setting that they feel that they're not, that they're in some place that's a little more sterile. We have a mini trampoline. We have mats to do tumbling on. We have a hammock swing for them to be in, and then we actually certainly work hands-on with clay and colored pencils and all kinds of things that are a very different approach than what most kids are used to be able to doing. And we do, and because as we talk about these different kinds of issues that kids have, that it's not just one that we're going to drill on, for instance, decoding for 3 hours. We work with movement, we work with timing, we work with attention, we work with memory, we work with visual, spatial puzzles, and we work on all kinds of executive function skills, cognitive skills that are not normally a part of any kind of academic program.
So a lot of our kids, they have what's called cross midline issues. So Mary almost always starts them off with some cross midline exercises and integrate them. We use something called the interactive metronome, which is a tool we use to actually improve neural timing, which improves attention, self-control, impulsivity, sports skills, handwriting. It's a great tool. We'll be working on working memory. And then a lot of it's on clay. And how do you go from words to pictures to meaning?
Right.
Have that just aha moments that Mira describes, where a kid all of a sudden learns, how do I go from words to pictures to meaning? Because their whole life they've been going from words to meaning, or not going from words to meaning very effectively.
Right. So we move seamlessly from one activity to another. And honestly, I've had so many kids that have like, wow, the time is over. That was quick. So that's our approach. We do our best to be able to make sure that the kids are engaged the entire time they're with us. They have certain choices. We use visual schedules. We start from the very beginning and giving them tools that we know that are going to be able to work for them. All right.
We have several core beliefs that kind of drive what we do. And one of them is that most smart, struggling students, probably 80 to 90% of them, are right brain learners who will not reach his or her potential with what they've been doing now. And as Mary describes, we went through this for years, doing the same old, which exactly was what professionals told us to do. But then we realized that these kids who have a lot more activity on the side of the brain that controls visualization, imagination, creativity, and problem solving, can be far more successful when you're taught to that way. And then we know that parents have been told certain things, and yes, we're contrarians. Okay, we don't accept the status quo if it's not working. And so we realize that, as one psychologist, Linda Silverman, out of the Gifted Development Center in Denver, Colorado, said, I normally have to refer out to 4 or 5 people to do what you so elegantly integrate in one program. So we talk about it. It's vision, it's attention, it's working memory, it's motor planning, and it's learning to go how to recognize words and understand what they mean.
Right. Listen, part of my frustration as a person that learns like this, let alone as a parent and as an educator for the last 30 years working with these kids, is that doing, what is that definition of insanity? If you do the same thing over and over and you don't make it and nothing changes. Well, that's how these kids feel. And even though there is sometimes 1 or 2 indications that kids need certain things that need to be repeated, we have so often found that for these right brain learners, there are all these other things. And if we were talking with a parent just the other night about the fact that, they need to be able to be reinforced. They need to be able to feel successful. They are pleasers. They are not choosing to not want to learn. They're not choosing to not want to read or not be able to read. I remember years ago, we had a child of a psychologist who was in tears when his parents were here with me, and he was like, I would give up video games if I could read. And it was just sort of, wait, what? Kids really want to be able to do this. It's just, they're wired differently. Well, so why are we trying to rewire them to be able to rewire like everyone else? Well, let's celebrate those differences and let's teach to them. That's what 3D
for people who are on LinkedIn, where there's been a major campaign by Richard Branson's organization called Made by Dyslexia, where they talk about all these right brain strengths as dyslexic strengths. And it's amazing because they talk about applying them in the workplace. Mira's actually put together a program that actually applies them in the learning environment. Right. So that visualization skill, the problem solving, the creativity, all are blended into what we do.
Well, because as we've recognized, not all visual and right brain learners are dyslexic, but most dyslexics,
probably 80 to 90%.
Probably,
all the studies, by the way, show that people with dyslexia are right-brained.
Right.
And quote unquote, the scientific world says our goal is to shut down that right brain and to make that left brain much more efficient. At 3D Learner, the goal is to actually leverage that right brain while integrating it with the other side of the brain.
Right.
And Mary, you want to talk about?
So the 5 common challenges that we have seen are sort of we've got this together with these within an executive function. And there's a lot of talk today about what executive function means, and that's including working memory, that's including planning skills, it's including sequencing. So for the right brain learner, first of all, they're often not just identified as that. They're just identified as not being successful in school. Sometimes they're put into this big pot of specific learning disabilities. Sometimes they can be diagnosed with the label of dyslexia. There are a number of parents that don't want to be able to have their kids labeled. We try very hard not to be able to be in the label zone, because sometimes that label, though sometimes it's certainly helpful, and in another conversation we'll talk about how it's helpful to be able to get services within the realm of being able to empower kids to be able to be successful. We're trying to be able to empower them with what their abilities are. So we talked about the fact that not identifying them is an issue, executive functions and other kinds of processing skills, visual processing especially, though auditory processing can certainly be a big part. Think about it in terms of when your computer is not going as fast as you want, and that processing is just not as fast. Well, for whatever reason, we have equated intelligence with how fast someone responds to something. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to be able to come up with those amazingly creative ideas, which we know these kids and adults are totally capable of doing. It's motor planning issues. Can my brain and body work together smoothly to be able to be efficiently learning? And then the problems, certainly, if the problems persist, the gaps of what kids can do and what their accomplishments are gets wider and wider. And then there are behavior problems that actually have the root of what some of these issues are. But then teachers and parents and professionals are always looking at the behaviors and what can we do to stop the behavior. Well, they're not really looking at the antecedent of what is it that caused those behaviors to be able to be like that in the first place. Now, and also the investments, and we know that we especially have made enormous investments, both certainly in time, but certainly financially. They rarely result in reaching the full potential that these kids can reach. And yet we have found that these programs that you hear me saying, that I am not slamming any of them, but sometimes we have found that when you get these executive function and foundational skills and cognitive abilities, right and motor planning right, they can take off, and then that investment is just amazing. So
And the interesting
I
thing
think that's
is
in the order.
probably 90% of our kids are right brain learners. And of those, almost all of them have executive function issues, whether it be working memory, attention, or processing speed. And about 75% have visual processing issues. Again, they're good at seeing what's out in space, but they have problems focusing and they wind up skipping words and lines when reading. So that white space in the middle actually makes up a lot of the smart, struggling kids who learn differently, have executive functions, and have visual processing issues.
Right. Every single professional report that Mark and I have read in the last number of years, way more than every years before, where that specific identity of executive function, and it's a buzzword you're probably hearing all over the place, is popping up everywhere. And yet schools, teachers in their school system have heard about it, but they just don't have the tools to be able to deal with that. And quite honestly, that's a basic piece of what's happening.
And what happens if kids are not identified? As Mary said before, the gap widens. Behavior problems are really common. And child may think they're not smart or even dumb, even if they got 110, 120, or even 135 IQ. We've seen kids with gifted IQs who think they're stupid because the system teaches one way and they learn the other way. And then we had one parent spend $34,000 on a competitive program, and their kid was still reading at the first grade level. Fortunately with us, we were able to get her to the fifth grade level in 6 months. Okay. And so it's not unusual for people who've not been identified to really struggle. And they really amount with homework to be taking forever and the kids not having time to be a kid, which is really a crime.
That's the biggest problem. I've probably been pushing that, especially with the pandemic these last 2 years, when kids have not been able to be out to socialize, not been able to run and swim and be in boats or do any kinds of outdoor real physical activity. That's been a big downer. So we need to be able to find that wonderful balance in between.
Now, especially for kids in first grade, turns out that almost 90% of the kids in first grade with a word identification problem will be poor readers in fourth grade. And it turns out 74% of the third graders with a reading disability will still have it in 12th grade. But what's even worse, and we've seen it recently, maybe even worse than it's ever been, 45% of the kids in special ed are 3 to 5 years below grade level in middle and high school, and another 20% or 21% are 5 or more years behind. And we've seen them, and it's not just people from economically challenged families. It's people whose parents are lawyers, entrepreneurs. Okay, they're really successful people, but the kids have basically missed that learning process that enabled them to become good readers.
Truly failed by a system that didn't recognize their abilities and zeroed in on the one thing that they thought they could do, which is sort of the one tool that they had. And it's just so depressing, because how many hundreds or thousands now of these meetings have we sat in on, and they're stuck on the fact that within a year, you're lucky if you make a year, maybe a year and a couple months progress within that school year. So they're not even thinking goal-wise in terms of what would they have to be able to do to be able to help these kids get better. I talked about it a little bit last week. For some of these kids, they have gotten so stuck that they can't, we talk about their abilities to visualize. They can't even visualize themselves being readers or being successful learners. That hurts, because we know these kids, when you find the topic that they light up about, they truly light up. They could tell you anything. And so it's not that the spark for learning is gone. It's the spark for the way they learn. We need to help find. So, is your child a right brain learner? I guess we better talk about that first and foremost. How do you know? And is there a definitive test? I'm not sure there's definitive, but there's definitely some markers. And as Mark said before, when your child is struggling in the system that has been presented to them for more than a year or two. It is a very logical, sequential, and what we call left brain system. It has not changed in over 100 years. And this idea of a right brain person is someone who is very emotional, someone who is creative, someone who thinks whole to parts. So if this looks sort of familiar to you, this is exactly the way I would look at that airplane box and put it together. Reading directions, I get it. I mean, I know they're there, but it's lots of words. I need to be able to figure out how those things. It's not to say that I don't read directions, but I do read directions almost from the back to front. It's kind of a funny situation, but the point really is once you recognize your child is really like that. Now, it's not to say that every child is a Lego kid. When we get those kids, yes, it's wonderful. Or sometimes we'll find that parents will say, yeah, my kids used to like it, and somewhere along the line that just sort of missed. But the truth is that these are kids that usually, and that's why we've been so successful when we use clay. I've been astonished about how kids take that visualization from here and be able to make it in, and talk about an executive function, to be able to actually pull it out of their head and be able to make it to something concrete that is something that they recognize they own and they know forever and ever.
These are kids who can tell you sometimes visual directions. You might ask them what street it was. They don't know, but they know where to turn and how to get to places. And they're also kids that get lost when you bombard them with words, but they really understand things when you show them and let them experience. And they respond really well to goals, especially if they can visualize that goal being done.
Let's remember they want to win. They want to please. And that please and win is sort of an interchangeable kind of thing. And so being able to make sure that we have goals for these kids, and for us parents, we want the really big goals. Those are great, but we need to be able to have them little by little so that they can feel that sense of accomplishment. It's why we train parents and train kids, and everything that we do is a visual schedule. And when we check it off, that's like one mini goal that we've reached, to be able to have them have that success of, I accomplished something. So down here on the fourth one, it says that your child learned best when they discover the patterns themselves and they have that aha moment that I'm talking about, right? Oh, I get it. And it's so interesting because sometimes when we're teaching, we're not entirely sure what it was that we said or did that got that moment, but all of a sudden they're like, I get it. And then they turn around and show us, and it's just a wonderful thing to be able to see. And when kids get that, everything changes. And it winds up, it's exactly like this spiral that we created. So there's this 3D child, this right brain learner. They get something, that aha moment. We reinforce it. Even if it's approximately right, we reinforce it, and it goes, oh, I want to do that again. And the more they get it, the more they repeat it, and the more they actually get this I can attitude. It sort of goes back to what I was talking to a little bit ago about sometimes as parents we get stuck on the fact that I was told to do this because everybody says it's the right thing to do, and my kid's been doing it for 2 years and I've only seen a little bit of progress. But if you as the parent have only seen a little bit of progress, how much do you think your child has seen? They're in the thick of it, right? So if they don't actually really recognize the fact that they're making any progress, do you think they really want to be able to keep doing this? It's when we now then have so many more emotional and anxiety outbursts to be able to then, oh, come on, just keep doing it. And then what do? We end up rewarding them for, come on, just go, and I will take you for ice cream. We'll do something about that. And that's fine. But if they're not getting anything out of it, what are we doing?
And we had a kid a number of years ago, 6th grader, reading at the 2nd grade level, which is unacceptable, but often happens. And when we told him we could help his baseball skills as well as his reading skills,
we'll talk about an aha moment, right?
He lit up like a Christmas tree. And all of a sudden he was excited. And his father said, we're really here for reading. And I said, I know, but our goal is to get him to that point. And if we can use improving sports skills as a vehicle to get him hooked, so to speak, and then have him read books about baseball players and improve his reading comprehensions to 3 or 4 grade levels, I think it's okay. His father said, if you can do that, it's a miracle. And sure enough, 4 months later, he was reading at grade level, 4 grades improvements in 4 months. He hit 10 home runs the following season instead of 1, and he was off to the races. So it's a lot about trying to connect with what's important to the kid, because the intangibles, we had one client who said, you changed my kid's attitude, and that was 90% of the battle. And the fact that her kids wound up graduating from Harvard and MIT when somebody told her to forget about those schools is just delightful. But our kids range IQs from below average, average, above average, and gifted. We deal with a whole range because people who are right brain come in all sizes, so to speak.
Right. So, what are the tangible opportunities for your child and for you? I mean, this is about our helping you, the parent, to help your child leverage its skills. And the truth is that there can be significant improvement in, and we're going to call it reading speed, but also truly efficiency and comprehension. We get, sort of, oh, are you just a speed reading? This isn't about speed reading. This is about being able to read at a reasonable speed for a child's age and grade. For a high schooler who needs to be able to read a number of, for 6, 7 subjects, if they're reading anywhere between 100 and 150 words per minute, that can mean that homework can take hours. But if they can read anywhere between 300 to 500 words per minute, which isn't, when I was in college, they were pushing Evelyn Wood speed reading that could read 3,000 to 5,000 words per minute. And
we're not
that's
that.
Completely right. We are not that, right? We're trying to be able to make sure that kids are reading fluid, like their eyes are fluidly going across the page, but more than that it's actually making some kind of a connection in their brain about what it is they're reading. They're creating a movie. And if it's going so slowly that they have to break up and sound out every single word, and if they're doing it silently, that it's basically sort of reading out loud but with your lips closed, that just is tortuous, and it makes it so that it can't be very fun, right? If you ever watched a movie in slow motion, well, that's what's happening here. And what we're trying to be able to get the kids to do is to be able to get that movie to happen. I have seen more kids. We have worked with more kids that actually were pretty decent fluency wise, because that's an easy thing. We get parents that say, well, their fluency is low or their fluency is high. Honestly, we've seen kids that have been quite decent decoders and fluent, but they didn't have any understanding about what they were reading.
And by the way, that's a really important point. Schools will often quote a reading level when they're talking about how efficiently somebody reads words. I've had a 10th grader who's a school told me the kid's reading at the 9th grade level. I challenged him what his comprehension level was, and the guidance counselor said they're two of which are pretty much the same. I said to the psychologist, test him. She tested him, and it turned out his comprehension was the 4th grade level. His fluency was at the 9th grade level. So it's really important from our standpoint, and from parents' standpoint, and from the kid's standpoint, is how well do I understand? Fluency is a part of that, but the real goal is just a kid understand what they're reading, enjoy reading. And the other thing is with homework, we've had kids who've gone from 2.5 hours to 1 hour and 15. And one mom said, yeah, and I went from 2.5 hours to 15 minutes because all I had to do now is check to see that my daughter had done her work, and she asked her daughter, how come homework's taking like half the time? You can do it independently. And she says, it's amazing what happens when you're able to pay attention and understand what's going on in class. Right. So part of what we do is work.
Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mark.
We work on improving attention as well as learning skills, because what happens with a lot of these kids, they don't have as many neural connections in the brain to make paying attention easier. So using the interactive metronome, you can improve their attention while Mary's working on all those other skills.
So this means better test scores, right? I'm going to go back to this for one more minute. It also means that if they're having less homework time, they actually also get to be able to do more things that they want to be able to do. And it also gets them to be able to be in classes with other kids that are just as creative and smart as they are. It's okay, we'll catch up because I think we do it again.
Yeah.
So if your child is a right brain learner, we've put together these few questions for you to consider. Does your child think in creative ways and solve a problem? And I have given you even excuses. We were in a workshop a number of years ago when we were able to do those live with a lot of people in them, and a number of parents were like, "Oh, my kid is just so amazing at coming up with excuses." And I kind of chuckled and said, "Listen, your child needs to be congratulated for coming up with something that's also certainly that kind of creative in what they were thinking." If your child is emotional and sympathetic, I thought we did. Right. If your child is sympathetic, emotional, they actually are so for the underdog. They are truly, on this "that's just not fair" kind of thing. They see it for other kids that are being mistreated. They are fiercely loyal to friends and causes that where they see an injustice. And we hear that from parents all the time. And in so many ways, that's that kind of perseverating rewind of picture that goes through their head over and over again, and they just can't get over it. And I am going to tell you, just as one sort of coaching tip, find another way to be able to coach your kid away from that versus saying, "Oh, it just doesn't matter. Calm down, slow down, just really get over it." I will tell you, even to this day, when I get emotional about things, Mark has truly learned that it's like telling me to, "Oh, it's just not worth it. Just get over it." If it doesn't work for me, I can totally tell you that it really does not work for these kids. They are truly passionate. They can't get on it. And when they're 3 and 4, we're really good at being able to divert them, to have them think about something else. I have to tell you, you have to just be a little smarter than that, a little more creative than that for these kids that are older, because quite honestly, they get stuck on that picture too. So try to be able to problem solve with them about creating a different kind of picture for them to be able to come up with a solution that would work.
Okay. I think we actually went back.
This went backwards. I feel like
Okay,
this
so
went backwards.
going
Talk about
forward.
a visual. They was forward.
Right. Okay.
Okay, here we go again. Thank you.
So there are issues that are often not identified, addressed with the right brain learner. People often talk about phonics, phonemic awareness. They'll talk about working memory, but they don't talk about actually solving the problems. And what we found, and other experts have found, is these right brain learners have trouble recognizing words and understanding what we call high frequency or sight words mean. Words like "and," "the," "what," "but." And think about it, they don't have a natural picture for what those words mean. And so therefore, when they just have an index card that says, "read this word," all they're doing is reading it. It could be Greek, it could be Latin, it could be English. It's important to understand those words. And then, Mary, you want to discuss the multiple meaning words?
Well, so multiple meaning words is especially problematic certainly in language arts, but also in math problems. But the challenge really becomes is when the kids don't really, they will use vocabulary, and this is really tricky because sometimes parents will say, "Well, my kid uses really big words," and they will pick them up and they'll use them within a conversation. And I know I've been amazed that kids use them in the right context. The challenge becomes is that if they will sometimes use that same word and try it in a different sentence and it doesn't quite work, and you kind of go, "Wait, do you really understand that?" Kids would be amazed that they're not able to make that flexible move to be able to understand the innuendos of what words mean, let alone the tone at which something, the way people talk and how they pick that up and how that changes the meaning of words. So it's not just the verbal part of the word, it's also the nonverbal language that is often a problem and often misunderstood for these kids. And unfortunately, texting is become a real issue for these kids, and they miss that all the time. I can tell you how many of us get messed up about that text.
And they
Excuse me.
also have problems with things like working memory. They just don't remember what they learned and are not able to access it. And very often people will say, well, just give them a text box or I'll give them something to remember it. But that's a skill that actually can be improved dramatically.
And
And
the
the
thing
same
that's,
thing,
sorry, Mark, but the really thing that, and this working memory thing is a little bit of a confusion piece because so many of these kids have really good long-term memories, right? I think one of the questions we asked before is, does your child remember places or experiences they did? The working memory piece is when I'm in the middle of doing something, and now I'm talking about science, can I actively activate that memory of things that I remember, of things that I need when I need it? And that's what working memory is really about. It's not the fact that kids have, sometimes memory really is an issue, and we have to be able to work on that. But the working memory piece is, and Mark's absolutely right that so many teachers make the assumptions that we'll just use accommodations to be able to help these kids to be able to work
and
on
we
that.
actually assess for and visual memory and auditory memory. We've had kids that have been the 95th percentile in visual memory because that's the way their brain thinks, and the 5th percentile in auditory memory. And the report says their working memory is average because if you average 95 and 5, you come to 50. We look at 95 and 5, say the kid's got a really strong visual memory, the kid's got a really weak auditory memory. We've got to work on that.
Oh, and how many times have we heard parents say, and I tell my kids all the time, and they just don't listen. And we're like, yes, partially because of that auditory memory piece. It's not that they
Yes.
didn't hear you. And they really, it just, those words just went right through.
And processing speed, which is often related to how well somebody processes visual information, is slow, and they can also have problems in transitions. So when they're working on project A and then you ask them to immediately come away and let's do something else, it takes their brain time to adjust to that. And you have to learn to live with that while you improve that skill.
Right.
And then the most common problem we see that there's a lot of controversy in this world, but several psychologists I've worked with, they come to our office and they see a Visograph, which is a machine where we show exactly how a kid's eyes track when reading. And they'll say, I never realized that the kid's eyes are going two different ways at the same time. How can a kid read? Mira's had this problem as a kid. I had this problem as a kid. Mira's incredibly sensitive and well trained, and now sits on a board of a company that's working on this. So it's really important to identify an issue if there's a problem with convergence where they skip words and lines when reading and address it. And then motor planning.
So motor planning, Mark touched a little bit about it. It's sort of amazing. I can't tell you how on a daily conversation I will talk to parents, and even parents whose kids are sort of athletic. And I will say, do you remember if your child crawled or not? And it's just that kind of piece, because crawling involves being able to have your right hand and your left knee sort of go. And it's that idea about when Mark talked about circuits crossing back and forth from right to left. Motor planning is a huge piece. Our brains only pick up circuits from what our body has taught them how to be able to do it. So it goes right back to when kids were really younger. I can't tell you how many teenagers I have doing body exercises that will cross that imaginary midline, that we do things that, and yes, and we make it fun, we make it silly, but it really makes an enormous difference. That again, that our brains learn from the body path of what our bodies do. And yes, it's a bit of muscle memory, but it's also circuits that are being created to go back and forth. Because if you think about, well, go ahead. If you think about the right brain, it's sort of language goes from left to right. I mean, you need to be able to have those connections that go from one side seamlessly to the other. And the only way it will do that is if our bodies can actually go back and forth. Why sports and musical instruments, there's been a lot on social media about the importance of music, playing any musical instrument, playing piano, conducting. You have to be able to use both sides at the same time.
And some people have asked us, obviously you can talk about a gifted kid or a kid with above average IQ. What happens for a kid who's lower? And we had a group of 13 of them a few years back where they were economically challenged. Their parents weren't as helpful as others. But over a 7-month period, they averaged a 3.125 grade level improvement in their reading comprehension. So it's when you work on the whole child and you improve their word recognition skills, their vocabulary with high frequency words, their flexibility with vocabulary, their working memory, their processing speed, their visual processing, and their motor planning, and then you put it together in a way that significantly improves reading comprehension. And we do, admittedly, have them read things they like, because if I'm trying to take a kid who's in 5th and 6th grade and move them up 2, 3, 4 grade levels, I want them to love reading. So we do put them on a chocolate diet where their goal is to find things they like to read and improve their vocabulary, improve these other skills, and the transference is really excellent over to other things.
Right.
And the first 3 keys to success is really parents adopting that mindset that success is the only option, or as we talk about in our book, outrageous success is the only option. Because if you set goals to really improve a kid's skill set, work with the right professionals, and then do the follow-up, these kids can be far more successful. But it all starts with that mindset shift, and then with an assessment that gets to, how does this kid learn best? Where are they strong? Where are they weak? And what's their present level of performance, especially on reading comprehension? And then it's about partnering with the right professionals who excel at helping kids like your kids or grandkids, because the truth of the matter is, we're not perfect for everybody, nor is anybody. You want to find somebody that matches. If the kid's a right brain learner, has the executive function and maybe the visual processing issues, we might be the right choice. If the kid just has decoding problems, they're probably somebody else should work with them. But for the right brain learner, you want somebody that is experienced in working with them.
Where there's also no ceiling on what it is that's not expected. We just don't know. Do I,
And by the way, so many times parents have said to me, look, I know you think you can help every kid. You can help almost every kid. Okay. But what about the school? Can you actually change the school? We're not Houdinis. Okay. But we're not going to say we can change the school system, but we're extremely good at helping this child get the assessments they need for special education, or for what's called 504 plans for getting accommodations, and then getting the right plan with goals and accommodations that match the kid's needs. And I've been called a collaborative advocate because I'm really strong at what I do, but I'm always working for a win-win where the teacher, the parent, and the kid benefit from what we do.
Right.
And then people ask, well, how do I find out more? Go to 3dlearner.com. There's a strengths and challenges worksheet at the bottom. You can link. You can call us, okay? Or go to 3dlearner.com/book now. And again, if you want to, and we welcome joining friends and family joining us next week, we're going to be talking about why outrageous success is the only option. And then if people want to read the book is really helpful. We're going to post the link on our Facebook page to the no-cost download, or if people want to order through Amazon, they can. The link will be posted on our Facebook page momentarily. And if anybody has any questions, please holler.
We appreciate your coming. You're joining us this night or joining us on the rewind. We're here to be able to answer questions. We know that there are a lot of people that think that, what is this thing about kids being right brain or left brain learners? I'm here to tell you there may not be a whole 18 different learning styles. There are lots of different, but this is truly, now it's been around long enough. And now that there are enough people and the more creative people, that we realize that in fact, there is a right side and a left side to our brain. And yes, our goal is to have everybody be whole brain learners. Let's be clear about that. That would be awesome. But, in the meantime, let's do it where that strength is and move on.
Thank you very much. I hope to see you next week, or better yet, on a phone call, so we can help you put your child or grandchild on their pathway from stress to outrageous success.
Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. Good night.